Welcome, class. This is another lecture. We are currently talking about loops. So we're going to continue our discussion about loops. We're going to add a little bit more to it today. Today's topic is actually going to be nested loops. Now, just like with nested ifs, I'm sure you can kind of guess what that means. It's a loop inside of a loop. Now, I have a basic for loop here. Kind of take a look at this. And basically what it does is it's going to start at 0, go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 times, 5 times total, and then it will print fuzzy in the name. So if I do a little print, you'll see fuzzy, 0 to 4. Now if I change the number, that to a 10, it would go 10 times. This is the variable that controls basically how many times this thing goes. Now, if I were to add another loop inside of it, for example, in this case, I'm going to use another for loop. Now notice, first and foremost, that I have, and I call this nested loop for those who want to name their project. Uh, Notice that I have here, the first for loop is for int I equals 0. The second for loop is for int j. Now we've discussed this before, but I can make another for loop just like this, and it is perfectly fine with it, with no errors whatsoever. But that's only because I only exist inside this for loop. If I were to come in here and try to put this I inside, immediately it'll tell you variable I is already defined. Now once the for loop is over with, it doesn't need the I anymore, so it throws it away. Now if I want to have another for loop inside here, I have to use another variable, in this case j. And if you want to know why did I pick I, why did I pick j, well, historically speaking, uh, A, B, C were usually drive letters. D was usually like the CD-ROM drive. Uh, a lot of the letters were used for particular things, would be my most likely guess. I, J, K weren't. So it's just more of a historical reasoning. I can honestly make this anything I want. I could say int count, and then I would just have to change each and every one of these little doodads in here, and it would be perfectly fine. Yep. So, uh, I prefer I. It's just what I'm more or less used to, so there we go. Now, we've seen fuzzy. It prints fuzzy 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, when I have a loop inside of a loop, this is going to go 5 times, that's going to go 5 times. Now, the way this works is the inside loop will go 5 times for every 1 that the outside does. So if I just do some simple math, I should get roughly 25 printouts. So if we take a look at this, we've got fuzzy 0, and then we have pickles 0 through 4. So take a look. The fuzzy starts, it prints. I is 0. We come down here and we're going to do this 5 times because a loop will go until it ends. And that's why you get the pickles 0 through 4. Now once this loop ends, I throw the j away. I don't care about it anymore. I come to the end of the I come back up. I is now 1, in which case I print fuzzy 1. But guess what? We reinitialize this for loop here, the j, and we do it again, 0 through 4. Once that goes all the way through, the loop ends. I come up here, I come back up, I increases to 2, and then we print. And then it increases to 3, we print. It increases to 4, we print. So if you count this, you'll get 25 total pickles and 5 fuzzies. So the inner loop technically runs 25 times. Now, where would nested loops be useful? Depends. Nested while, nested fors. Let's say nested fors are useful for if I wanted to read in text from a text file or something like that, or maybe even write it out. We'll see a project of kind of similar to those here later. Uh, Nested whiles might be pretty decent for, let's say, if I had menus, like if I had a text-based menu system, and you hit one menu, it takes you to a sub-menu underneath that. Well, that would be good for nested whiles. So you'd have your main menu, you pick an option, and that gives you another menu of things you can choose. When you leave, it exits out of that inner loop and comes back to the main loop, which puts you back on that first menu again. That's where nested whiles would be useful. The difference between for and while, well, a for, if I know how many times I need to go, then I'll probably use a for. It's simpler. If I am going until a certain event is true or a certain thing happens, then I would probably use the while loops. A lot of people get these confused, particularly early on. The for loops, the while loops. Which one do I use? They'll just throw in a for loop. And if your program's supposed to go until they type in, let's say, 0 or something, a for loop's not going to cut it. A for loop will go a certain number of times. What if they don't type in 0 a million times? Well, then your for loop better be set to go in a million, right? If you're going to use a for loop. What if they go a million and one, million and two? What if they go 5? You don't know. So a for loop, although you could force it to work, isn't the best choice usually. Usually you'd want a while or a do while for that. But a for loop would be good. If you know the number of times you're going, like if you're reading a text file, you can find out how big that is, how many lines need to go. If we're dealing with a two-dimensional array or something, an array is basically a list of things, uh, numbers, objects. A two-dimensional array would be basically kind of like, you can kind of envision it like an Excel spreadsheet if I wanted to read it one cell at a time, all the way across and next row, next row, next row. That would be kind of the applications for these. All right, and that is your quick little tutorial over nested loops.